And so it's recognizing that your brain is always going to fill in the gaps when it doesn't have all of the information. But when it fills it in, that is not the same thing as a known fact. Welcome to Sensitive and Self-Assured. Before we get to today's topic, let me tell you how I know you're in the right place. You feel everything, and at some point you started believing that was the problem. My name is Alyssa, a highly sensitive woman who stopped trying to fix herself and started learning to trust herself instead. This podcast is for the woman who edits herself before she speaks, loses herself in relationships, and still quietly wonders if something is simply just wrong with her. Nothing is wrong with you. Your sensitivity isn't a problem to fix, and self-assurance isn't out of reach. They belong together, and this is where the two meet. I think I have mentioned on the podcast before that my partner travels a lot for work, and he has been traveling recently and telling me stories about the people he's interacting with and, the activities that they're doing and the conversations that they're having. And I noticed that in all of those cases, my brain was kind of filling in what this person looked like, even though I hadn't seen a picture of them. And it filled in a height, a weight, a face, a hair color, all of the things, what they're wearing, their demeanor. It filled in this whole image of a person whom I have never seen, have never met, will probably never meet or interact with in my entire life. And then there have been a few instances where he has shown me a picture after the fact, and I'm like, they don't look anything like I thought they would. And I acknowledge that my brain completely made up what I thought they would look like. Not even realizing that's what I was doing, but having an awareness after the fact. And it's just so fascinating to me that we do that on a regular basis when people are telling us stories about other people in their lives whom we don't know and have never met and never seen a photo of. Our brains fill in what we expect them to look like. And pretty much every single time, if we then do meet them or see a photo of them, they don't look anything like what our brain created. And it got me to thinking about this phrase that one of my mentors has used, and it was something that her mentor shared with her. So I don't know the exact origin of this phrase, but it is that your brain is not a reliable source of the truth. And how true that statement is. I mean, if our brains don't have all of the information, they don't like that. And it doesn't like those gaps or those blank spaces. And so if it has incomplete information, it's going to fill it in. And what's interesting is when it fills it in, it doesn't say, hey, I'm filling this in because I don't like a gap, but it's just kind of a placeholder until you get all of the information. No, it fills it in and then it presents it to you as fact. And you don't really experience it as a guess, you experience it as a knowing, and this is true. So what happens in the stories that you tell yourself, the same way that our brains will fill in the gap for a stranger's face, it will also invent some meaning behind your silence, your mistakes, your worth. It fills it in situations where you send a text and you don't get a response from the other person for a few hours. And so your brain fills in the gap and says, this person is upset with me. Or I know last week I talked about, staying silent in meetings. And so let's say you have a moment where you decide to speak up and the words don't come out the way that you wanted to and you kind of fumble over them. Your brain is going to fill in the gap with, they think I'm incompetent. Your brain fills in the gaps, and your inner critic starts reporting information that is most of the time completely inaccurate, but it's reporting it as if it is a fact and calling it the truth. Your brain will also do this with predictions about other people. It is that same mechanism, and it is pointed at the other person's internal chatter, their internal thoughts and emotions. And when you don't know what they're thinking, your brain fills it in and it writes their thoughts for them. And when it does that, it is usually starring you in a very unflattering role. And then it leaves you feeling really, really cruddy when you actually have no information truly to base that on. So the point isn't that your brain is broken or that there's something flawed with your brain specifically and that you can't trust yourself at all. It is just what brains do. And so it's recognizing that your brain is always going to fill in the gaps when it doesn't have all of the information. But when it fills it in, that is not the same thing as a known fact. And so learning how to tell the difference between a moment of complete fabrication versus a fact, something that is very black and white and can be proven to be true, telling the difference before you make a decision on top of whatever the information is. Because when you make a decision based on fact versus making a decision based on fabrication, that looks very, very different. So something that I want to encourage you this week as you are going about your life, and know that this is going to happen all of the time, every single day, is simply pausing and naming. When you catch yourself having a strong emotional reaction to something and you don't have all of the information, ask yourself, what do I know to be true here? And what did my brain just make up? And I think, you could say, what did I just make up? And that kind of is true, but it really is your brain. And so I encourage you to phrase it that way, because I don't want this to become a situation where you start beating yourself up because you just made something up, right? So what do you know to be true? And what did my brain just make up? And then as you are going about your days and the week, and you are asking yourself this question, I would be curious to know how many quote unquote facts you're operating on that are truly just your brain's best guess. And it completely made it up. It's a very eye-opening exercise. So I would love to hear some of the crazy things that your brain has made up. I know mine has quite a wild imagination, and it has come up with some pretty far-fetched things that are not even remotely close to the truth, especially when it comes to the things that my brain has made up about other people and the thoughts and emotions that they are having. When I've had conversations with people then and asked questions, and they tell me what they were really thinking and the emotions they were really happening, it's eye-opening, but it can also be kind of humorous when you come at it from a perspective of curiosity, just how vivid of an imagination our brains truly can have. So I would love to hear what your brain fabricated this week. So send me a message or post on social media and let me know. And as you're moving through this week and being really or being really curious, I just want to remind you that you were never meant to abandon yourself to get through life. You were meant to live it, sensitive and self-assured. Until next time, take care.